Hello, everybody. Garrett Blevins here. Sorry for the delay. First off, Raw Nationals and the travel out in Orlando took more time than I expected, and so I'm a week behind. For that reason, if anybody has already posted double for 2 weeks worth of coaching calls in this section here, that's totally fine. I'm going to go through all the calls that are here. Likewise, if you did not post double, you can do so in coaching call 106 coming up and put in the number of videos that would associate to the weeks that you did not post. So feel free to make that up. Again, sorry for the delay, but we're going to hop right into the call now and get to work. So this set was not too happy with my ankles. Did not appear to be 100% flat on the ground. Got it. Heavy's triple lash training cycle ties my best. Triple. All right, yeah, we'll take a look and see what's going on here with the ankles. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think some rocking in your feet is usually okay. But if that heel is coming up and they can see daylight under there, you could get dinged in a competition for that. What I think you need to do to deal with this is probably just continue working on the ankle mobility, or just move your foot a little bit further forward and really try to put the pressure of your foot instead of into your toes, into your heel, and your toes will probably stay down anyways. The weight moves well. I'd put that either at a 9 or a 9.5. If it ties your best triple ever, that's good news. I think you're going to be ready to get a little bit more weight on there soon. So we'll see. I think you, yeah, this moved pretty well. I'm going to watch this last rep. I mean, there was definite slowing on the last rep, but you still pushed through really well. Yeah, I put that at about a 9. So I think you could have gutted out one more rep if you had to. As far as form review in general, it's a pretty solid bench press, but I just want you to make sure that you're not losing tightness through the lift. Some of that might be coming from your foot positioning where your arch is impacted. You don't have much of an arch here. And I would say, one, work on that a little bit if you can. If the belt helps you, great, but sometimes the belt can hinder an arch as it locks you in a little bit more, especially if you're wearing your belt lower near your hips. But if you're putting all your pressure into your toes and you're worried about your heels coming off, that may lead to some of this up and down motion that I see through your torso. So you're just not maintaining that pressure all the way through and keeping that weight up on your traps here. It was slight, but you can see here, look how high your abdomen is, and then compare that to here where things have really flattened out. So that's something you want to maintain that arch throughout the entirety of the bench press. That's the biggest issue that I see. And I think messing with your foot placement here will help you keep your traps and your arch in the same position throughout the entirety of the lift. Other than that, it looked like a pretty solid set and was moving fairly well. Back here. All right. Hey, Garrett, first, good luck at Raw Nationals. I appreciate that. It went really well. Had a great time. I need to make a video. I'm behind. This is kind of the first business thing I've done. So I need to get up on YouTube or Instagram and get some reviews of how the meet went. I'm sure people are curious. But overall, I'll just tell you all it went really well and had a great time. For the deadlift, I've been having trouble keeping a straight back. I think my lower, mid, and upper back all round, it was pointed out last week. Tried 99 breathing drills, but what else should I do to work on it? Bench is going good. Squat spine, more flats for the first time. Squatting heavy here. It's fit. Okay, so as far as the general question, continue working the 90-90 breathing, and then don't use weights that you can't maintain a proper spinal position with. If you can film, I would definitely appreciate that so I can see your deadlift as you're working with that drill. I can give better advice if I see where you're losing tightness, see maybe some tweaks to your setup process and other things. So throw a deadlift video in for next week if you have not already put one maybe later in this call. But the 90-90 breathing is going to help you learn how to brace, and then repetition work in weights where you're not losing your position is going to strengthen and pattern that movement so that you're going to be lifting in the correct ways. So Actually, let me back up real quick. I want to make sure this is the war flats for the first time squatting heavy. Okay, so this is first time in flats. That's what I wanted to check. I read that right. So it's a little tough to tell here, but it looks like there's already maybe a little round in your back. Just make sure you're standing up tall. I can't 100% tell. Yeah, okay. So the first thing that I'm seeing here, well, the second rep looks a little bit better. I mean, first time squatting in flats, it's going to feel funny, and the bar is going to usually drift forward or too far back because you're just not used to the ankle angle that you have. The second rep looks a little bit cleaner than the first. Okay. So the biggest issue I'm seeing, other than that first rep, it gets more pronounced on the fourth rep here, and I think the first rep was kind of, let me see if you actually went down in front of your feet or not. No, it was the tilt, same thing. So here's what I want you to look at. Let's change the speed here and back this up. So I want you to look at your back angle right here. If we look at this angle where your hips, you're about halfway up, the bar right now is over midfoot where it should be. And you basically have, if you took the angle right here, you have like a 90-degree angle in relationship with your torso and your femurs. So on the way down, again, pay attention to your torso angle here. It's about, if we looked at the ground, torso is about a 45-degree angle from the ground. Come down here. Now from this position, again, look, torso is about 45 degrees when compared to the ground if you just extended a line from your back to the ground. As you come up, notice how your back angle flattens out. I would say you're probably at 30 degrees right now. This is not where your hips and your torso were. Notice here, this is no longer a 90-degree angle. Your torso has flattened out quite a bit. You're really relying a lot on your back to finish this lift. What you need to do is to make sure that you do not let your hips shoot back up as you come out of the hole of the squats. This means that you're going to have to increase your quad strength so those knees can stay forward, and you're going to have to mentally think about keeping your torso more upright as you come out of the hole on squats. Again, this is your first time in flats, so things are going to feel a little funky. That's to be expected, but you've got to make sure that you're staying tight. You're just losing tightness in the hole. This is allowing you to get into this more bent over position where you end up good morning the squat up through this portion of the movement. And with a set of 4 at a lower RPE, I don't want to see that technical error. That may show up when you go towards maximal lifts. It just may be unavoidable. But for the repetition work, I definitely want to see a more upright torso angle throughout the entirety of the lift. That's going to be more a mental cue than anything else of keeping that chest up and not losing tightness as you go into the hole and letting yourself get tipped forward. Do not let those hips go back unless the bar is coming up at the same time because it creates that kind of funky lockout position. So, here we go. Garrett, see a lot of powerlifters give advice on always performing bench press with a pause versus tap and go or touch and go. I feel like it is unnecessary to pause on benches for normal training 4+ reps as long as on tap and go, weight is not bounced off the chest. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are pause the first and the last rep of every set, unless you're under about 4 reps like you mentioned here, in which case I pause almost all of my triples. Unless I'm doing speed work, which I haven't done dedicated speed work in a long time, I like to have a pause in there somewhere because you don't want to lose the ability to stay tight with a pause. Also, never bounce the weights. That excessive like heaving really is not training very well, and it can cause some other issues and even just mess with your ribs and separate things. You might be fine for a long period, and then you'll go down and tweak something and it can just mess with you. There's not really any benefit to it. Now, a light touch can be fine. I don't have any problem with that, even on most of your higher rep work. But I still like to pause at least the first, and usually the first and the last rep of each set, and then I'll do touch and go for the reps in between. There's no reason why you can't mix in the set. And again, it's so that you learn the skill of pausing benches. You do not need to pause every rep on every set of bench ever. That's the same people that may say never do touch and go deadlift rep work. Show me great deadlifters, and I will show you many great deadlifters who do touch and go work. because it helps them work their muscles. It basically, it's a variation. It's a very slight variation. And I use variations throughout training cycles. I'm not always competition specific, and you don't need to be. How many weeks out of a meet do you recommend true pauses on benches? I recommend true pauses on benches at least for one set, but again, like I said, the first and last rep of every set, every week of training. If you're 24 weeks or 20 weeks out from training, maybe you can do all your stuff touch and go. I'm sure it wouldn't be a huge issue. I just like to leave it in there because I'm actually stronger with a pause, and pausing the first rep helps me kind of grease the groove of my bench anyways for the rest of the repetitions. However, definitely go more towards the 2 seconds, not the 1 second, because in competitions, you don't know if you're going to get a judge who gives slow start commands. So prepare for that worst case scenario. That'll help you with your expectations of what you're going to bench come competition day. Also, I believe you're getting pretty close. I'm trying to remember your username from this. Yeah, definitely start pausing your benches, at least the first and last rep, especially the first rep. Okay. Wanted to get your feedback on sumo deadlifts. Continue trying to apply your feedback of not doing the reset at the bottom of the lift. You think it makes sense to continue doing that? Definitely think my form has been better using this approach. All right, we'll check this out. When do you do a critique on my depth on squats? All right, you got it. I'll start with the depth on squats first because that's a real simple thing. I know that you have struggled a little bit with depth before. We'll see where we're at now. This looks pretty good. It's right at depth, but this looks pretty good. I'd like to see maybe just a little bit deeper. This rep was high. Second rep was a little higher than the first one, so you're going to want to work on consistency. This rep was also a little bit more like the second rep, so the first rep was better. I believe the first rep was better because you had your hips in a more neutral position. Here, your hips are cocked back a little bit, and you have a little bit more arch in your back. That's going to lead you to have more difficulty reaching depth. So you want to make sure that you pull those hips back neutral in between each rep on squats. Yeah, the second, third, and fourth reps of this set were all higher than the first, and I believe that's attributed to the position your hips got in. You just had a little bit more of an arch in your back on those. Continue working on getting to neutral. Continue working on mobilizing the hip, and make sure that you are just see if your ankles are able to. Let me back this up a little bit more. See if your ankle can go forward, but it looks like your knees are plenty far forward enough. This is more about your hip construction and getting a little bit deeper. But I liked your depth on your first rep. All right, I'm going to want to see you pull the slack out of the bar with your upper back. Very good. This is a major improvement. Keep using this form, this setup. This looks so much better on deadlifts. This is really good improvement. One thing I want you to maybe think about is your neck position here. Maybe just a little bit more neutral in the neck, but you seem to do pretty good with it. I don't want you to think about too many things. I want you to keep up with exactly what you're doing here. These had much better back angles than you're having, and I think you're really starting to learn what it feels like to be in the right position at the start of the rep. The first rep looked pretty darn good as well. But keep doing it this way. This looks really good. I'm liking what I'm seeing here. So excellent, excellent progress on these. Appreciate it. Got back to the gym this week for my reintroduction block. I think I learned a crucial lesson that I should pay as much attention to my own body, not the weight itself. During tempo squats, I shifted focus from the bar to my own torso, telling myself not to pay attention to the bar. Ended up having much better form. Yeah, it's that mind-muscle connection. Yeah, it's where you're feeling, instead of focusing on an external stimulus like the weight of the bar, how it feels, you focus on an internal state, which is where your body positioning is. I call it muscle proprioception, but it is that mind-muscle connection. So I'll take a look at these and see what is going on here. AMRAP work from the first 2 weeks worked pretty well, especially on bench. Next block you sent me has no AMRAP work specified, but how can I incorporate it myself? So what I want you to do is send me over the logs with the AMRAP work that you had. I didn't want to add too much in there, so I think we're going to recreate the same thing, but I just want to look over the previous log, and we'll probably adjust the same days and the same exercises to have an AMRAP on them. But again, I want to look at it, and if you can give me just a little bit more info on how those went for you and how your fatigue felt in an email, I'll look at that this coming week and get back to you on that. These look pretty solid. I'm looking at bar path here, especially bar path on the way up. There's a slight tick forward where your hips are coming up just a little bit faster than the bar, but it's very slight. These look real good. And I like the speed of the tempo as well. Tempo is even slower here. Even better tempo. More control of the weight. And you have less of the tick forward on these. Let me see here. Which tempo squat? 245. It's the 245 the second week. I gotta make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, this week is cleaner. The tempo is better, and also you have less hip rise and chest fall at the bottom portion of the lift. So continue getting your mind inside your body. For lack of a better way of describing it, it is making a change, and I like what I'm seeing here much better. I think that may play a role in future work. Also, your tempo was much better when you got inside yourself and was thinking in that internal state. So week 2 certainly looked improved and had better bar path. I've not had a deload week since July. I'm 6 weeks out from my next meet. Feel like I'm weaker and fatigued much more than 2 months ago. That's true. It's because you're in a meet prep state, and you're going to feel more beat up at this time. You're going to feel real beat up basically up till week 2. And so that's 100% to be expected. It's completely normal. Your basic training throughout, especially in the off season, is not going to be as fatiguing as your meet prep. However, if this continues and you're feeling just horrible next week, we'll pull back a little bit, and that way you can head into the singles with a little bit better preparedness. But feel free to email me. I know you're in meet prep. I think, this wasn't from too long ago. Yeah, we may adjust week 5. So send me an email. I believe, So send me an email on this, on how you're feeling right now. This post is a little bit old. We get to this late. We may adjust, but it is normal to feel this way. Don't take a full deload week. You do not need a full deload week right now. The deload will come right before the meet. Is where there'll be a break for you to recover. Glad you enjoyed Raw Nationals. It was by far the most fun meet I've ever done. It was awesome. So I really enjoyed it. Nice. Washington person. Good deal. Yeah, I have thought about the attire thing, but it's low on the priority list as far as what I'm doing with the master's work, children, my own training, business, and full-time day job. It just hasn't showed up in the available time slot, but maybe at some point. And yeah, I would like to do some meet coaching, but oftentimes just with the way things work out schedule-wise, because I lift on Saturdays, I have to travel on Wednesday, spend Thursday and Friday recovering so that I can give my best performance on Saturdays, and that usually messes up most of the meets. It's also one of the reasons that like Bryce doesn't do a ton of personal handling, and some of the other TSA coaches do a little bit more of the legwork on those days. So if I'm ever not competing at a major meet, I would like to definitely take a team and coach a little bit more. But again, time and lack of resources at this particular point, as I'm investing in other areas and prioritizing them, have taken the forward. Okay. One of the movements since I started BCR guide I haven't really asked about is the 4-inch Spoto press. I've watched some videos on the movement. I believe I'm doing them correctly. I want to see what you think. I'm doing them correctly. Got it. We'll take a look. They're mostly lockout work, so you're pausing the weight off your chest quite far. Yeah, these look good. You're a little bit less than, actually from how far away this video is, I think you're good. This looks perfect. Yeah, you're doing the Spoto is exactly correct. You do not need to bring that bar then down to your chest or anything like that. It's just pausing it, helping you stay tight, and creating more and more time under tension in that range of motion where you are weakest. And so that's what these are about. I will say RPE 8. I don't think this was RPE 8. I think it was more like RPE 6.5 or 7. So up the weight on these a little bit. It looks like that was definitely like a really easy set. I would think that, I would look at that and say that's almost your last warm-up. So either your strength is up some, or you just, because you're holding that weight and you're really focusing on being tight, you're overestimating the RPE, which with paused work can definitely happen. So start to increase the weights on these a little bit and see if you can get a little bit closer to an 8. Week 4 of block 1 right now, okay? Is there going to be a deload when transitioning to the next block? No. There will be a slightly easier week in the next block, but you're not going to need a deload every 4 weeks with the way that the programming is built in. Part of that's because of the auto regulation that's within the program. Deloads have been brought up a couple of times in this call, so I'll expand on it just a little bit. The reason some programs will have deloads every 4 weeks or every 6 weeks is because of the intensity of the program leading up to those deloads. I have found that building a little bit more manageable volume with consistent training can produce more consistent results. Oftentimes, if you have to deload every 4 to 6 weeks, you end up losing on a yearly period weeks of time that you could have spent training. And while those intense periods of training may help you adapt, oftentimes the time off can work against that. Also, they become more intense training cycles when you're going hard and you're in the thick of your actual work weeks before the deload, that they have a higher rate of injury or setbacks in that sense. So I prefer a little bit more moderate amounts of volume without the need for a full deload. There will be a deload coming in on week 12 before a triples test, if memory serves. That'll be in block 3. Starting to water load for my meet next weekend. Technically, or I heard recently on the TSA podcast that it was recommended to cut fiber intake a couple of days prior to weigh-in as well. Is this something you suggest? If you've never tried it before and if you track your fiber, go for it. If not, I have found that getting that water cut down has been pretty easy for me when I just lower my salt intake just a little bit the day when I'm trying to lose the weight. So I went from about 240 to 230 without much hassle the week of the meet. I was intaking about 2 gallons of water a day. I had a lot of weight or a lot of salt Wednesday. Thursday, I hate more salt Wednesday than I usually do. Part of that was because I was traveling and the food I was eating, and part of it was just because I wanted to eat some salty stuff because I felt like it and I had enough time to still let that clear my system. Thursday, I still had like a moderate average amount of salty foods. And Friday, I ate pretty clean and didn't salt any of the food that I had. A lot of things like rice or chicken breast or things like that, as well as some, I believe it was some yams and maybe some mashed potatoes. Whereas like Wednesday night, I was having a chicken fried steak with gravy from Denny's. So that's to give you an idea of where the salt and the fats and all that sort of stuff came from. But by the time I got to Friday, I was continuing to drink those 2 gallons of water. My salt intake was less Friday than my average. I don't have a percentage for you, but it was probably 50% to even 50% less salt than usual, which allowed me to, when I was drinking my water, I would immediately drink like 12 ounces of water, and then I would go to the bathroom and pee 12 ounces out. And I was in that cycle where as soon as I intook water, I was peeing it out. On that Friday, I took in about 12, or sorry, not 12, took in about 2.5 gallons of water, so another half a gallon more than usual. And then 12 hours before I was going to weigh in, stopped drinking anything and ate minimally until I got into the meet and was able to weigh myself on the scale and saw that I was at, I think I was 229.5. Now, again, that's all a water weight change. When I weighed myself after the meet, I was 235 again. So I had gone back over. One thing to do though is don't try to recoup all your weight right after you weigh in. Because I was 229.5, I then poured some, it was coconut water, and what was I eating at that time? A banana. I went for bananas and coconut water with pineapple juice mixed into it. And I weighed myself holding those items of food to make sure that I wouldn't be overweight. I gave myself half a pound leeway. So I held enough food in my hands on the scale that I weighed 230.5. And then I ate those slowly leading up to the weigh-in, so that when I ate after the weigh-in, my body was actually going to hold on to it instead of being shocked or kind of fasting for 12 hours and then trying to throw a bunch of food in. Instead, I gradually went into that, and that let me very comfortably hold about another 4 to 5 pounds of water and a pound of food during the meet without feeling uncomfortable. So, got it. So that's the basic stuff. Now, for you with a 24-hour weigh-in, you have a little bit more leeway. I'm talking about 2-hour weigh-ins, which a lot of you have. If you have a 24-hour weigh-in, you can sauna off some of this weight. I mean, you can still do the water cut as I described exactly. That should get you where you need to get to. But weigh yourself before you go and weigh in. If you're a couple of pounds off, go sauna that weight off, go and weigh in. You're only doing 7 pounds here, which is not, a crazy amount of weight. And then start eating don't eat a crazy amount of salty, greasy foods that are going to make you feel bad, but eat either your baseline or above the amount of salt that you would normally intake. That will help you hold on to the fluids that you drink. Be consistent. Don't try to recoup all your weight in one meal the hour after you weigh in. You have a lot of time to recoup that, and you don't even need to recoup all the weight that you lost. So eat consistently and get to the point where when you're intaking fluids, you're not immediately having to pee it all out. Again, eating salty foods along with sipping on a drink instead of guzzling things down is going to assist you in putting that weight back on. Hope that answered your questions. All right. Trying the higher belt position. I think it's helping with more neutral back position. When I did conventional deadlifts before, I had a terrible running with low back. All right, yeah, let's check this out. It's also a 1 rep at 10, so should be a pretty good tell of how much rounding we have here. Yeah, look how flush the belt is to your back. I definitely think that this is a better belt position. One thing I'll note is it looks like your shoulders are a little bit behind the bar here. I'm expecting these to drift forward, and what I'm really interested in is how far forward do they drift before the bar leaves the ground, and do you have to round your back as they go too far forward? So right here, okay, so they just kick right forward over the bar. That's good. That was an extremely solid single at 10, and honestly, I'm gonna watch this again. Well, it moved at a 10. It was definitely a conservative 10. I think you could handle more weight here. You move through that sticking point at your knees really well. Back up, here we go. It's a great deadlift. There's only one thing that I would say as far as adjustments on this deadlift, and it's the way that you finish the deadlift. You really swing your shoulders back instead of bringing your glutes and your hips to the bar. This creates a little bit of a soft knee that you might get called for in competition. Everything from the starting position to through the knees is good, but once the weight crosses your knees right here, all I want you to do is just squeeze those hips to the bar. Instead, what you do here is your hips kind of stay in this position and you really swing your back this way to finish the lift and lock it out. Instead, when that weight crosses your knees and you get into that explosive lockout, just think shooting the hips forward instead of this sweeping back, because you shoot the hips forward, but your back's a little bit too far back. You just overextended the lockout a tad. So just bring the hips forward, which you do right here where those hips go forward. Just start that hip forward motion a little bit sooner. Great single, really good rep. Belt position looks perfect from what I can see. So excellent job. All right, that is it for the coaching call today. Appreciate your patience. If you missed a post where you did not post for this current week because we're still on 105, feel free to post double next week and just mention that you're posting double because you missed. And I'll get you caught up on your services there. Again, I appreciate everyone's support for Nationals and your patience for this video. And wherever you're at, I hope you are doing well. Blessings.